Hello dear viewers and welcome back to our glorious channel. My name is Icrix and the less handsome man in front of me is Kunagusis.
They don't know what we fucking look like. Hi everybody, yes.
They're just gonna have to take our word for it. They're gonna have to take my word for it.
Yeah, your word, which is absolutely reliable.
Yes,
anyways,
I'm the most reliable man on this planet.
Anyways, welcome back. We are proceeding through our eastern expedition, you might say. Just outside Parsa, clearing up some enemy stragglers.
We're already battling outside Callans.
No, we're fighting outside Parsa.
Ah, right, okay. My bad.
Yes.
As always.
Yep. It's our army, the Recolour.
We're moving them back towards Parsa.
Yep, but we have extreme drought, and that's why we're getting attrition.
Ouch.
Yep.
I haven't had drought in a while.
Yeah, there's not much you can do to avoid it when you're, aside from just not being in that area.
I see we decide to increase our tax income.
Yep, for a smidge. What's this? The other day I read a small little article by Res Bellica about Latin B swords in Roman use. It's quite interesting.
Yeah? What's it like?
Well, basically, so I suppose to explain, Latin is the term given to refer to Celtic material culture from the kind of Iron Age, firm later stage Iron Age. Take, say, probably from the 4th, 5th centuries BC. And it was in stages of A, B, C, D. And the Latin era sword is the iconic Celtic sword, although of course it came in different stages. And the Latin B sword, which was not as long as the sword we would typically imagine the Celtic sword to be, though still fairly long, was, I believe, a fairly popular sword in Roman use before they adopted the Spanish sword.
Why was it popular?
Don't know exactly. Probably because it was a pretty effective sword. It was, I don't know much, but I take it was probably long enough to be usable for slashing, but short enough to be handy for thrusting.
Just basically pretty efficiently durable.
Probably. Again, Celtic swords were known for being quite high quality. Well, they're understood rather to be of high quality, but it is noted that a lot of ancient authors were fond of commenting accounts that they would bend in battle. Bend quite easily.
They would bend easily?
Supposedly, in various accounts, that after one or two swings they would bend. Of course, there's been a lot of ink spilled about how true that may or may not be. I don't remember when I was reading Radomir Pliner, and it's been a while. I think he seemed just to lump a lot of that to kind of propaganda of sorts. I know.
Sounds more like propaganda to me.
I know Jean-Charles Duplessis said in doing testing with these sorts of swords that they found that yes, they would bend, but that's after quite a lot of stress put on them, which is normal for any sword. Giol Canestrelli seems to say that by the time period we're getting these accounts, you're talking about how do I put this? By that time period, there was already a sort of kind of middle class that had developed. And so these are people that would have had the means to afford stuff like swords, because again, swords are expensive, so not everybody has a sword in these times.
Obviously not.
So these are people who could afford swords, but probably they're not like the nobles who could afford the really high quality swords. So they're probably getting more cheaply made swords, and those are probably, they're lesser quality, and those are probably the ones that are bending more off. They're bending more easily. So Celtic swords could be quite high quality. The Celts were master ironworkers, and it certainly would make for one of the many things the Romans had borrowed from the Celts. Because what part of the Roman panoply was not derived from Celtic panoply? You know?
I suppose.
Their helmets, some of the more popular helmets in the Republican era were Celtic, Montefortino and Culus helmets. The Culus is a lot like Montefortino, but it's just a lot simpler in its design. Again, they used Latin B swords until they adopted the Spanish sword, which is itself derived partly from Celtic swords. The so-called Spanish sword, or Gladius Hispanensis, was I think a result of a hybridization of Latin B, Celtic swords and local Iberian short swords. But yeah, so we are fighting a random army. I think these is some sort of rebel army. So we have our horse archers, our Parthian mercenary horse archers, maneuvering around to shoot at the enemy. This army also has a unit of Parthian cataphracts in it.
Okay.
This enemy army is mostly just a bunch of cheap, low-tier spearmen.
They're not that efficient?
No, they're cheap, low-tier spearmen, so yeah. Like levy spearmen of sorts.
Basically just fresh meat.
Kind of. Again, we could easily auto-resolve the battle, but I don't want to manually resolve it, so yeah. So
understandable.
We have our cavalry coming in. I'm trying to see which one this is. I think that's our Gallo-Thracian. Yes, I think it's the Gallo-Thracian cavalry. Because they have Terreoi. And here's our cataphracts charging.
How are the DEI updates coming along, actually?
So they didn't release any updates around this time. They're working on some small bits and pieces, I believe. I don't remember anything too major. I think maybe a few visual tweaks of the Thracians. Not the Thracians, the Dacians. Yeah,
cosmetics, visual.
A little bit of that. I think they might tweak a few units for the Idrisians, just their population class. That's as far as I know. I think there's going to be some summer update.
Yeah.
I think Sertorius mentioned to him and CEMN were working on something. I forget what it was. Again, I think it's mostly visual touch-ups. So that's as far as I know. Oh yeah, I think they're planning to do some slight overhaul for the Caesar and Gaul and Hannibal at the Gates campaigns.
Why?
Just to kind of update them up a bit more and update the units more.
Just to make it a little bit more polished?
A bit and more in line with the specifics of the period.
Oh, so they're going for historical accuracy.
Well, yeah, that's usually the general approach of DEI. To a degree, is to emphasize as much as they can of accuracy. So, because Caesar and Gaul takes place at the kind of 1st century BCE, so it's quite late in the DEI time frame. And Hannibal at the Gates is 2nd Punic War, so that's about the late 3rd century BCE. So there's probably just a lot you'd want to really narrow down and make specific in how you depict it. So yeah. So that's the gist of it. Other things, waiting on Izuru's update to his Legendary Empires HD Greece mod, because that will include a Seleucids visual overhaul. So yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I'm gonna try and get to doing replays again and sort this campaign out. So that's where we're at in general, the DEI related updates. So yeah, but on to the topic we were previously discussing, I was actually about to say that there's evidence of I think even domestically produced Latin Celtic swords for the Romans.
Really?
Yes, I believe there's some evidence that some of these swords were actually domestically produced, not just.
Where does this evidence come from exactly?
I think archaeological finds.
Okay. What do you think? Do you think they're accurate or genuine enough?
I wouldn't be too much of an I wouldn't be that much of an expert to know, but I feel like I'm being generally inclined to trust Res Bellica. Granted, they are people who make these things. They're kind of for reenactors and enthusiasts. That they're kind of like a merchant of sorts. So let's see. But I was linked around the DEI Discord, and I know that they work with Jill Canestrelli, and his book in Celtic Warfare was really good.
All the same, I mean, like, they could still be exaggerations of what they were actually like.
Well,
but you said yourself, they're merchants.
Well, it's yeah, well, I'll just have to see, but
Because merchants, like, especially back in those times, they would have liked to...
I'm talking, well, Res Bellica are modern for reenactors, especially. They make stuff for reenactors. But, yes, there's just a little article then talking about how some of the evidence for Celtic swords in use in Italy and the Romans. Archaeological and visual source remains in the 4th and 3rd century BC. Latin sword became the main side weapon of Italic and Roman world. How the sword became widespread is well studied among the Veneti, Rhaetians, and Ligurians. So even it's shown in a lot of Etruscan tombs, images of it in Etruscan tombs. So apparently even popular among the Etruscans. They have a drawing of a sword from S. Vittore that has, I think it's probably something written on it. From sword from San Vittore. Latin B sword dated from the 4th century. Inscription blade tests that the sword was produced in Rome.
Okay. When you think it's a genuine article?
I mean, usually they're pretty solid enough. They do a lot of videos talking about these things, and they tend to get people who are usually knowledgeable about these things. But yes,
historical consultants.
Usually people at least who are involved in reenactment, at least.
Ah.
Let me see now.
Well, in other news, we seem to be thinning out the ranks on the battlefields a little bit efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Our forces spread all around. Looks like our enemies have run for the hills. Say the battle is firmly within our bags.
But yes, the battle went well, certainly. Again, it was expected to go well.
Was there any other result we were expecting?
That's what I said. Expected to go well.
So anyway, you were saying beforehand about the
But yeah, so it does seem like there's at least some evidence of Roman use of Celtic swords, because the Romans used a variety of different swords until the Spanish sword became popular. A lot of these were Greek swords, like Sipoi and Copsides. So, because you see the little curved sword that our general character has?
yeah.
That's a coppice.
Uh-huh.
So plural Copsides, it's kind of a curved sword. And then the Xipos was a short, kind of leaf-bladed thrusting sword.
Oh, so it was like the same general quality?
Those are the swords that the Greeks used. Ah, yes. I see what you were talking about. You mentioned to me about a sudden gap in between events, as you see the sudden jump cut. Is this what you were talking about?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about
I think I know
earlier.
what happened here.
Yeah, me neither.
I think I know what happened.
Yeah?
So you saw how the UI got all really transparent?
Yeah?
That's a bug.
Ah,
and the
right.
thing to fix it would be to reload.
Oh, right.
So, well,
okay.
what I do is I pause the recording, and then I would reload and everything. But periodically
yeah,
I forget to unpause. So I forget to unpause the recording sometimes. So that's what happens.
Sure. We all make mistakes.
Yeah, it's happened a few times in this campaign. But it's we're up against an Armenian army. So yeah. So this will be nice. So is there infantry there?
Infantry forces are going up, and they seem to be putting up a decent fight.
Yeah. We probably would have the advantage, I would say.
Why?
Well, at least I'm tentatively guessing. We have pretty solid troops. At least I'm tentatively seeing a lot of Armenic DWR2 and Georgian swordsmen, and they're probably not the highest of quality. Certainly the former ain't the highest of quality, they're just cheap levy spearmen.
Oh, spears going away. At least I think they're spears.
Like
Are they?
Javelins, throwing spears, yeah.
Close enough.
Well, a javelin is a kind of a spear, it's just a throwing spear.
Are these African, Indian, or
Indian
Syrian
elephants.
elephants? Indian, right.
Seleucids
How can you tell? How are you
use-
supposed to tell the difference between them, actually? I'm
Well,
kinda
for
curious.
one, this is the Seleucids, they don't use African elephants.
Okay, then how can you tell the difference between Indian and Syrian elephants?
Well, in the terms of the game here, Syrian elephants are heavily armored.
Uh-huh.
Those are not armored Indian elephants.
Ah, right. Okay, so they're
The paint
obviously...
on them and everything, they're Indian elephants, and they're the unarmored variety. Now, in terms of, in general, how one discerns an Indian and African elephant, one of the biggest ways to tell them apart are the ears.
Okay.
African elephants have big floppy ears.
No.
Indian elephants have smaller ears.
Aww.
Also, depending on which variety of elephant you're talking about, the African, I think it's bush elephant, is the biggest land mammal. But there's a smaller, I think, forest elephant species. And the Indian elephant is smaller than the bush elephant, but bigger than the forest elephant, if my memory is correct, if I have the elephant types remembered exactly. And certainly we know that the war elephants used in antiquity, the Indians were the biggest. We even have a description from Polybius when he was describing the elephant battle at the Battle of Raphia, a battle between the Seleucids and Ptolemies, where the Seleucids had their Indian elephants and the Ptolemies had their African elephants. And he described that he basically mentioned that the Seleucid elephants were bigger,
Ah, okay.
and that the African elephants were kind of afraid of them. Yeah, so
We seem to be getting on pretty well here. Are these our infantrymen?
yeah, so it's our infantry. Looks like largely Galatian spears and our cavalry surrounding Armenian Kentronian spears.
Okay.
So yes. Trying to find the exact quote from Polybius. But fuck, to dig up Polybius though.
What kind of quote are you looking for?
The description of the elephants at Raphia.
Ah, right.
So it's book 5. Let's see. But yes, it's just quite a lot of stuff in this book.
probably an encyclopedia.
Well, this is Polybius's Histories.
So yeah, another way of saying encyclopedia.
So Histories is in Historiae's inquiry. So he's pretty detailed. Okay, we're getting close. I think at the moment he's just talking about Antiochus versus Molon, which is earlier in the reign of Antiochus. Molon was like some kind of official who rebelled, I think, against the Seleucids, and Antiochus defeated him in battle.
Guess that didn't turn out so well.
Yes.
Cavalrymen are driving the enemy forces away up the hill, so I'd say that's a good sign. And they're going back down. Probably got bored.
Okay, I think I found it.
Alright, let's hear it.
Well, let me just see. I think I'm finding the account, so...
Wow, those are forts? I didn't even know that.
Yes. It's tricky trying to find this right now.
Is it like a huge encyclopedia?
It's just that this is one big page. That's the entirety of Book 5, and I have to scroll right down. I have to try and find where in his account.
How the hell is he able to fit all that information into one page?
Well, no, this is all one big web page.
Oh, right, okay.
Of Book 5 of Polybius.
Ah, right. So is it like a summary?
This is like somebody's transcribing of Polybius into a web page.
Ah, right.
Polybius was a historian back in those days. Like, he was a politician who wrote a history. He's one of our best and most comprehensive sources of this time period. So he describes how the elephants fight. So after describing in which the elephants fight, their tusks firmly interlocked, they shove with all their might, each trying to force the other to give ground, until one who proves strongest pushes aside the other's trunk. And then, when he has once made him turn and had him in the flank, he gores him with his tusks as the bull does with his horns. Most of Ptolemy's elephants, however, declined the combat, as is the habit of African elephants, for unable to stand the smell and trumpeting of the Indian elephants, and terrified, I suppose also by their great size and strength, they at once turn tail and take flight before they get near them. This is what happened on the present occasion when Ptolemy's elephants were thus thrown into confusion and driven back on their own lines. Ptolemy's guard gave way under the pressure of the animals. That's the gist of it.
Okay then.
Yes, this is Polybius Histories, Book 5.84. About 84.4. Yeah. 4 to 7, I would say.
Okay.
Is where we find his description of the elephants at Raphia. Now, despite that impressive display with the elephants, Antiochus lost the battle.
No one's trying to save him in the end, though.
From what I recall, the cavalry on his side, on his right hand side, because Hellenistic kings always fought on the right hand side.
Specific, but okay.
It was because the right hand was the place of honor in a phalanx.
What was the left hand for them?
I don't know, it's just that's the position. The left was the most honorable place at the phalanx.
Ah,
the right
okay.
was, rather. So he was positioned on the right hand side, and he fought the opposing cavalry in and he won, but what was happening was, I think he kept chasing them down. And this meant he wasn't there to support his men when they were struggling against the Ptolemaic phalanx because it was much bigger.
So it was a pretty clever ambush, basically.
Not an ambush, no. It just simply was that in the chaos of the battlefield, Antiochus kept chasing down the fleeing Ptolemaic cavalry. And what happened was that meant he wasn't really there to support his phalanx, which was struggling against a numerically superior Ptolemaic phalanx. By this point, the Ptolemies made one desperate move and had recruited a bunch of local Egyptians to join their phalanx. They basically, up to that point, I think they usually were wary of training up Egyptians and having them take part in their phalanx. But they did.
He basically got a little cocky. He thought he had the advantage, but then he just sort of like.
Yeah, again, Antiochus I think was quite young at the time, in his early 20s.
Yeah. You're prone to bouts of cockiness around that time, especially if you're in a war. You think you've got the upper hand.
Yeah. So there was
not
that
surprised, honestly.
He's called Antiochus the Great. I think he was the only of the Hellenistic kings to be called the Great in his lifetime.
Really?
Yes.
There was no one else.
Like, in his lifetime, because I think people wouldn't start calling Alexander the Great until after he died.
Suppose.
Alexandros Homegos was what he was called in Greek.
I guess I had to start somewhere.
But yeah. So basically, that's Raphia. I think it was probably one of the biggest battles in the Hellenistic world.
We have another slave uprising.
Yeah, I keep having that problem with this campaign. And we have our media trying to attack one of our settlements.
I believe we are at the end of our session, actually.
I do believe so. So our next our next video will begin with this battle.
Yes.
And I'd say we're pretty optimistic here.
Yes, indeed.